I'm Heather.
And I'm Desiree.
And you're listening to
the Perpetually Overdue podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Perpetually Overdue podcast. I'm Heather.
And I'm Desiree.
And today we're going to talk about a current event that by the time this episode airs, we're not exactly sure where this current event is going to be at, but it is the topic of the hour, and it is the UnitedHealthcare
pew pew
of the CEO. We are going to be very careful about what we say, how we say it.
Yes.
Because we don't want to be, one, held liable for saying any misinformation. A lot of our research we have gotten from reputable sources, but you're going to hear a lot of allegedlys. You're going to hear a lot of names being left out or different names, nicknames being used for people just to stay on the safe side so this episode doesn't get taken down. But for those of you who don't know about what has been currently going on, which I find that really, really hard to believe because it has literally been everywhere in the news and on social media, as you know, Desiree.
And I'm someone who technically stays away, so it really has to be thrown in my face for me to even be aware, because I don't go looking for that stuff. So if it came to my attention, I find it really hard, unless you really just are not on social media, but then and don't watch the news on your TV.
It has to be a big enough story, like you said. And I think that this one definitely is, and it has warranted a cultural shift in what I believe is a positive direction, but I think that it has definitely rustled a lot of feathers.
To say the least.
Yeah. Just to get into a little bit of the background, on December 4th, the CEO of the UnitedHealthcare company, which is one of many health insurance companies in the United States,
got pew-pewed
on his way to a meeting in New York. The suspect, which is now in custody in Pennsylvania, has not yet been extradited to New York. He is known as the adjuster. So basically, it was like a 5-day manhunt for this person.
Nationwide
Manhunt. There was a reward that was put out for any tips or information that could be provided to the FBI or to the police.
First reward was laughed at by the public, so
it was like 10,000.
So as days went on, they upped it.
I even saw a video on Instagram where somebody was like, "Wow, 10,000! So that's how much that these people think that we'll sell each other out for, $10,000." Which, let's be honest, with the way that our economy has been going, with the pandemic, with inflation, everything, $10,000 is a lot for a lot of people. It can make a huge difference to a lot of people. So it's definitely not something to like bat your eyelashes at. But at the same time, the symbolism of what this suspect has meant for a lot of people, the sense of sort of vigilante justice that he has brought about in this situation, people are really unwilling, because not just the symbol of what he means, but also the other side of it, which is these huge companies that are profiting off of people being sick, staying sick, not paying out on claims, and people unfortunately passing away because of it. So basically, it's kind of a class war that's going on between the rich and the poor.
Yeah.
This CEO was making millions of dollars, and he was doing it on the backs of people who were sick and dying. And people don't really have a lot of sympathy for that, understandably. So nobody was really wanting to sell out this guy for $10,000. But unfortunately, when that reward money got up to $60,000, there was somebody that was willing to do it, a McDonald's employee who ended up calling the police. This case will move forward and new developments will come, but that's what we have so far. So my thing is, I've never seen such a intense response to something like this happening on both sides.
Especially coming out of a time that significantly divided us as a country.
Yes.
Which was just a month ago. And kind of riding that wave for this event to have suddenly brought a lot of those divided together, not all, but a lot of those divided together, and feeling the same kind of, I wouldn't say apathy, but there was no sympathy for those, like the police, the mainstream media, and a lot of other CEO, millionaires, and billionaires who were going, we should be appalled by this. And the public was just like, you know what else you should be appalled by? X, Y, and Z. We're good.
Yeah, the response was widespread. It was all that anyone could ever talk about. I mean, I get onto my social media today and I'm seeing at least 10, 20, 30 videos in my explore page specifically about this person, about what happened, and about UnitedHealthcare, because now they're in the spotlight. To the extent that there's even employees that are leaking private Zoom meetings onto the internet talking about this former CEO, what he did for the company. I mean, they are really pushing hard to paint him in a positive light, and so is media. But I mean, if you think about it, media is run by big business. So they're going to spin the story in a positive way for the wealthy.
That's because he's the victim.
Yeah.
And the white male millionaire victim. So even more so, they need to paint him in the prettier light so that the public would feel sympathetic towards their demise.
That has not been the case. Public has zero sympathy. And I think it's because we are in a very unique time in history. There was a point in which people were more ignorant about what is actually going on. We have so much information with social media, with the internet. We are now aware of what a lot of these companies used to get away with and do behind the scenes that people didn't know about. We are now hearing them from influencers, from people who are just doing their research and putting that information out there. All of a sudden, we are now being educated. We have a greater understanding of what is actually at risk here. And then you have so many people who've come forward during this time and told their own personal stories about family members who were denied claims, who passed away, as opposed to putting their family in debt for life-saving surgeries, procedures, medications, things that they really, really needed, but that their health insurance that they had been paying into for years and years and years denied. And that was one of the biggest things about UnitedHealthcare. They're way down there as far as health insurance companies go in terms of approving claims. And they're currently in the midst of a lawsuit where people are talking about this AI model that they were using to basically process claims, and how they were aware, the company was aware, that allegedly there was like a 90% error rate, and a lot of legitimate claims that should have been approved were being denied. And that money the company was saving by not paying out on these claims, these heads of companies, CEOs, CFOs, they were pocketing. So there is really not a lot of sympathy, because when you think about the amount of death that has come from denying claims versus this one person, the scales don't add up for a lot of people.
And I will say, because I won't get into details, but I do have a personal loved one who is under that specific insurance. So I will say that I have seen firsthand, as they have been in and out of hospitals for the past few years, the issues and the ropes and the hoops we have had to jump through in the midst of the stress of having a loved one hospitalized and having their life on the line, different moments in time, and the lack of sympathy, the lack of care, the lack of urgency that comes with the things we've needed for this loved one's health, that is life and death, because they're also diabetic. I understand the anger, because I personally see it and go through it with the loved one. And it's been very frustrating. And it's sad to think of all the times we've needed supplies, and seeing other people's stories online that they've been sharing about how one person, their mother was dying. And I believe she might have been diabetic. Yes, she was diabetic as well. She needed supplies that they don't realize. They do realize, but they don't care, because it's not just insulin when you're diabetic. There are alcohol wipes, there are the needles, there are the pads. There's a slew of supplies needed with the insulin that you have to administer daily that are not provided for. And they requested, because she was dying, she was sick, they needed supplies that they were not getting. The morning she passed, they get a message from the insurance company that they have sent the supplies because the circumstances of the patient have changed. And the circumstances on the record said death. That is the circumstance that changed, that then allotted them access to the supplies they needed before her death, that led to her death. And you wonder why people are not sympathetic.
Yeah, because I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot of speculation out there that this CEO had a hand in all of this that created the circumstances where people were being denied. Not to mention that there's an ongoing investigation into insider trading. That this particular person allegedly sold 15 million of his United Health Group shares, knowing what was coming for this company. It's just a lot of shady practices that are happening behind the scenes. It's really, for me, disgusting to see how the media is trying to spin this as this is a good man who had good intentions.
It's interesting to see how mainstream media, when they want to choose who the victim in the scenario is, the light that they paint of them, that's completely inaccurate.
Yes, and we've seen them do this with a lot of white, cisgendered, straight male offenders. We've seen them do it with rapists. Who they will, they won't put the mugshot out there. They'll put like a school picture or something. They'll talk about all the activities that he was in and the model student that he was. And yet, when you have a person of color who is a victim of violence or police brutality, they're always going to show the worst picture of that person. They're going to talk about the fact that they may or may not have had a record. They're going to find any bit of information to paint them into a negative light of why they may have deserved that kind of treatment or that end to their life, as opposed to if they were white and male and cisgendered and straight. It's like enough is enough. We've seen behind the curtain. We know that the wizard has no power and he's full of shit. And we're not feeding into the lies anymore. We're not feeding into the propaganda that is being put out there. We know that the media is biased. We know that people like the head of Amazon bought Washington Post. So when you have these billionaires that are buying news publications, you already have a distrust of news, because we've seen through this past election how divided the news is and how much misinformation has been put out there. But then you find out about these billionaires who are buying up these news publications, and you're thinking, well, of course they're going to,
control the
narrative to their benefit. And that's exactly what they're trying to do in this situation. And there's a lot of speculation about the suspect, who's referred to as the adjuster. But I think what's unique about this particular one, I think that why people have really latched on to this is because this whole situation seemed very planned, well executed, and very intentional. Very movie-like, yes. Very movie-like.
Jason Bourne, someone said.
Vigilante message of delay, deny, and depose, which were on the bullet casings, actually parallels a popular phrase within insurance companies of delay, deny, and defend. People are like, oh, this isn't an accidental incident. This wasn't a crime of passion. I mean, it was, but it wasn't he knew this person personally.
Yes.
This was a tearing down of a giant, essentially. This is like David and Goliath. And so a lot of people are really latching on to that, because I think that in the privacy of our own homes, in the privacy of our own minds, we have thought about these types of things before. Not committing acts of violence against people, but we thought about like tearing down systems, tearing down oppression, essentially. And this feels like a step in the direction, even if it's not necessarily a step that you may agree with in terms of like the execution, but it's a step of saying, we're not going to put up with this type of treatment any longer. We're going to stand up for ourselves. And I think there is something to that in that sense, not necessarily, again, committing acts of violence, but being like, we're not just going to be complicit in our own demise, because the time for that is done. It's sort of like this eat the rich movement that's been going around of like, we're done with millionaires. We're done with billionaires. We already know that you can't even become a billionaire ethically. And there's no reason to have billionaires when so many people are in need and so many people are struggling. And in order to become that, in order to have that economic status, you're basically taking from the pockets of the poor. A lot of the times. And we're seeing that firsthand in the way that UnitedHealthcare has handled claims. These people have paid into this health insurance. They have given their own hard-earned money to be able to make sure that they have coverage when they need it, and they are denied that coverage. And it has been literally life and death situations. And we've seen a lot of people affected by this, so many more than this one person. And yet billionaires are scrambling. I heard that after this happened, the need for security all of a sudden got ramped up because people were quaking in their boots about what potentially could happen to them because of, I think, the response. Because it was something that didn't get just swept under the rug or ignored. And it was something that people were like, yeah, I'm about that.
And that was what they were not expecting. That's what caused the scramble and the fear, to the point that the CEOs of multiple big companies removed their CEO pictures and information from websites immediately, like day 2, because they were now fearful that they would become targets.
Yeah.
Because they expected the public to cheer for the victim. They were not expecting the public to actually be on the other person's side who committed the crime.
Side. Yeah.
The suspect.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think too, it's like, again, we went through a pandemic. We went through inflation because of a pandemic, but more importantly, we saw companies greed during that time and how they pushed prices unnecessarily, not just because of inflation. We saw CEOs being exposed on record saying that they were pushing the prices of products out there, necessities for people. We're talking about food. We're talking about toiletries. We're talking about not luxuries. We're talking about necessities. And they wanted to see how much the American people would take, like how much they were willing to pay for something. Where is the line? They wanted to test that line. And I think people have definitely had enough. We have an economy where the gap between the rich and the poor is getting larger and larger, and the middle class is now starting to disappear. And you have people working 2-3 jobs just to be able to pay basic bills. And it is going to get to a point where people have had enough. And if the peaceful protesting, if the working within the system is not benefiting them, these are the steps that some desperate people may take in order to get their point across. And I mean, even when the suspect was taken into custody, when he was taken in for booking, there was a bunch of journalists outside the precinct that they were taking him into, and he had something to say. I don't know if it was specifically in regards to the way that the news was handling it, because again, they were trying to be very sympathetic towards the victim, or if it was the fact that he was in custody at all, because again, nobody really expected the police to find this guy. Nobody was expecting, I mean, the pictures that they had, the supposed leads they had, they weren't really going anywhere. I wanted to read the quote that he said really quickly. Allegedly, he said, quote, "This is completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience." And I thought that was very interesting what he said specifically about lived experience. One, yes, though the literacy rate in this country is abysmal, and a lot of people don't fact check things and they just take things at face value, you also have a whole class of people in this country that are educated, and they do fact check, and that information is being spread via social media, via many different avenues. So there is education, there's information out there for people who are interested in learning. So he's talking about the average American citizen is not stupid. Eventually they'll see, and that is the case right now of what's happening. People are waking up to the reality of it. Even right-wing people who typically would not necessarily be in favor of this suspect, or they would typically be sympathetic toward the victim, they're starting to see, because they themselves are not rich. If you are not part of that class, if you are not part of that 1% group, you're not benefiting in any way from what's going on. And you may have family members or acquaintances or friends, people in your life, coworkers, who have dealt with their claims being denied, who have dealt with sickness, who have dealt with people in their lives, their loved ones passing away or suffering unnecessarily. And then he talked about their lived experience, which is what we're seeing. A lot of people coming forward, sharing their stories about their own struggles with the healthcare system, which wasn't always like this. There was a time when healthcare systems were not profiting off of the sick and the dying. And now it's become, how can we put more money into our shareholders' pockets? How can we put more money into our own pockets? And it's becoming very evident. And I think that the average person has a specific threshold of what they're willing to take. And I think when it comes to the price of eggs, they'll complain about it, but they're not going to go and
pew pew
somebody over it. However, when it comes to sickness, when it comes to illness, when it comes to life and death situations, I think that that's very different. I think you push people to a breaking point, essentially.
So there's that aspect. It's interesting because there are different layers to why the reaction of the public took on the unexpected turn, which was again in favor of the person who committed the crime versus the victim. So there's the fact that people are going, this system is broken. It's not in favor of the people who are paying you. We are suffering, and the fact that someone has done something extreme to bring attention to it, we're listening. And we feel like you should be listening too. There's that reaction. The other layer as to why people are not sympathetic to what happened is because people are going, interesting. You want us to feel for this victim in this whole grand national expression, but people are so tired. And I have actually some social media examples that people are saying it's been a little funny because the sarcasm and the snapback on social media
is real.
And they're going, let's pretend we treat the violence against CEOs the same way people treat violence against women. And the examples have been like, oh, murder is always wrong, but if you're going to go around wearing a flashy suit and a Rolex, I mean, what was he wearing? When people are like, well, he didn't deserve it, but what was he wearing? Or was he wearing his bulletproof vest? Because if not, I feel like he's just kind of asking for it. If he had just hired security, none of this would have happened. So there is a lot of sarcasm, especially just in relation to what women have had to go through. Because the system, when crime against them happens, it's always, but did you deserve it? But what did you do? So it's been funny to see how the public has turned this around. Again, mainstream media wants us to feel horrified about, but people are tired. And they're going, interesting, let's use this example. Because you don't treat other crimes the same.
No.
So why this one? Why should we care about this one if this is how you react to other crimes against people, period?
It's true. It's the victim blaming of marginalized groups. So women, people of color, any minority group, queer people. It's always, what did they do? How did they act? How did they deserve what happened to them? As opposed to focusing on the person who committed the crime and focusing on justice for that. A lot of the times, I mean, when you think about what women have gone through and how little justice they've received for the things that they've gone through, and I think that everybody knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, there's not a lot of sympathy when you think about how many people who've committed crimes against women have gone free with a slap on the wrist. We don't want to ruin their lives. They're young.
Potential.
They have potential. Yeah, exactly. The excuses are tired. People are, like you said, tired of the stark contrast of narratives between somebody who has money, somebody who is white, somebody who is male, somebody who is cis and straight versus literally any other group.
Else.
Literally,
which is wild.
Anybody else. I feel like it is a very interesting time in history where so much has happened in such a short amount of time. So much has been exposed about what people really think, how they really feel. And there's no more hiding behind political correctness. There's no more let me like beat around the bush about it. People have been so blatant about their prejudices, about their racism, about their sexism, that all the cards are on the table now. And we're like, okay, so we're going to fight back in our way of going, we're going to give you the same treatment that you give us.
I think the American people have finally been pushed to a brink.
Yeah.
And what this person did, I think also woke something up in people to go, we have a say. We can demand change. It's not because I feel the election happened last month. And I think there was a sense of hopelessness within the people who fear what's going to be the future. And there was a sense of can't change anything. We're stuck experiencing the hell that is possibly going to unravel next year. And I think this suddenly stirred people up to go, we don't have to accept that.
No.
And so people are finding various avenues to kind of bring the public narrative to go, this is not okay. And it's the thing that's not okay is not what people assume is not okay, which is funny. Because again, one of the other outrages is that people are also going, yeah, okay, someone was pewed, but why is this one white billionaire's, demise worthy of a publicized manhunt over other recent crimes? Because, for example, I didn't even know about this till days later, but there was someone who gunned down a school of kindergartners. 2 kindergartners were harmed at a California school the next day. I didn't hear any coverage about that.
Me neither.
It was only someone on TikTok that mentioned it. Then I had to look it up to even know it had happened December 5th because I had no awareness of this.
Those incidents happen so often without any sort of change. There's no regulation happening on these weapons. There's no systems in place to make it more difficult for people to acquire these weapons. And you have politicians who are being paid by the NRA, who are making it more difficult for these things to be regulated, and people's eyes are being open to it. That is the thing, too. It's like the victim in this scenario is indirectly responsible for so many people's deaths. Why should we care about his? And that's, I feel like, collectively what everybody's asking. Why should we care? Why should we care when he didn't have a conscience, when it came to denying coverage for people who were sick and in need of help, for people who are suffering and in need of help? Why should we care when this continues to happen over and over again unchecked? And that is the biggest thing about it, is because we see them doing something. We see them, acting out their sort of form of justice when it comes to this person's demise. But when it comes to the thousands of people, potentially millions of people over decades long of UnitedHealthcare and other insurance company denying legitimate claims, when it comes to those people's demise, when it comes to their lives, nothing is done, because everything is always in favor of big business, and it's always in favor of who has the power and who has the money to get a politician in their pocket, or to make something that is unsightly go away, to make an investigation go away, to settle a lawsuit out of court, to pay people off to stay quiet. We see it happen over and over and over again at the detriment of our own lives, and people are freaking tired of it.
You know what I think it also is that I had kind of meditated on the other night is because we have one side of the country feeling baffled and appalled, going, how are so many possibly okay with what was done? Like, they're going, someone died. Like, how are you okay with that? And here's a theory that I was thinking about, is the fact that mainstream media has gotten us almost desensitized about caring at this point. about the deaths of many innocent, not innocent. It's gone to the point that as a nation, it has happened so much. It has happened way too often, mostly innocent people. And it's gone to the point that mainstream media glides over it and we're just becoming desensitized to this. So the fact that someone who people feel may have not been so innocent, and like you said, why should we care about this one of the many? What's different? What makes him special that we should care more? Yes. To the point that he got a nationwide manhunt that was publicly on the news. He got special treatment. Why him? You know, and so there are a lot of things that I feel like have been brewing for the last decade plus that people are finally going, enough is enough.
I agree with you. And I do feel that even within myself because of just mental health. How can you see so much suffering and so much death in the world, not just in the United States, and not have some sort of coping mechanism of how do you move on and how do you do daily life and not get stuck in the sadness and the depression and the melancholy of the way that life is. Unfortunately, death is a natural part of life. How it happens and when it happens can be very unfortunate, but it comes for us all. So that aspect of it, coupled with the injustice of seeing so many people go without any sort of closure, without any sort of justice, just because of the color of their skin or their gender or who they love or how they identify. Versus someone who we know was actively participating in terrible things, doing terrible things, and yet,
getting
like
paid
you said,
so much money for it,
benefiting off of the suffering of others. And like you said, it's not even about caring. It's about caring more for that person versus everybody else who needed that sort of justice as well, who needed that swift movement of like, let's find this person, let's bring them in, let's make them pay. We're seeing how biased the justice system is when it comes to who has the power, who has the money. Again, a lot of people
who
are
gets
just
help,
so tired.
who gets help and who doesn't from the justice system.
Exactly.
Which it proved again. If you're white male millionaire who has influence, you'll get first dibs at getting help from the justice system over so many.
So much so that even the person who turned him in, who was promised or told that you would get this reward if you do it, is not going to see a penny of that money. Because one, she didn't call the correct tip line. She called the police instead of calling the FBI tip line, which already as a criteria that nobody knew was necessary in order to even get that reward money.
If you need to call 911, you're not thinking, oh, I need to Google what the FBI tip line number is. Your thought is, this is urgent, call 911.
Exactly. Or, you know, like they don't lay out all the rules and regulations of how you can get this reward money, all the hoops that you need to jump through. And there are many hoops because statistically, only about 20 to 30% of reward money actually ends up getting paid out at the end of the day, because a lot of the people who put up the reward money make it as difficult as possible for that reward money to pay out. Not only would she have had to call the correct tip line, but it would have had to have resulted in a conviction, which we're not there yet. So there's that. But she already had a strike against her, so that's done. And then on top of that, it's up to $60,000, meaning they don't have to pay out the full amount if they do end up paying it out. So now you have about the 20 to 30% of reward money that actually does end up getting paid out. Only 60% of that reward money gets paid out. So she wouldn't have even gotten the $60,000 likely anyway. And then on top of that, she lost her job. So they dangled this American dream, you can make this money in front of her, denied her that, took her breadcrumbs of the job that she had, which probably provided her with health insurance, which is what this whole thing is about. So it's like a full circle moment. And then so many people were outraged that this person was turned in because, again, he represents something, a movement right now. He's a symbol for people that they flooded this McDonald's with 1-star ratings. So the response has been swift and it has been extreme. And I think that there's a lot of people in positions of power with money who are seeing the shift culturally happening, and they're becoming scared because the tactics that they have used throughout history of pitting us against each other, it's not working anymore. And now they have exposed that even when they provide incentive to turn against one another, they will not fulfill that incentive. So now, even more so, they have shot themselves in the foot because they are not even going to give the little that they promised to give in order to pit us against each other and to sell one another out.
People were apprehensive before to help, and due to an reward that was being offered, now, after proving that most likely you will never have access to that, and you're being lied to, good luck getting people to call in.
Ever help you again.
Exactly.
Good luck. So it's very interesting. The response, the timing of everything that's been going on, I don't think is coincidental. I know that you had basically something to say about just the interesting timing of it all with some metaphysical aspects or astrological aspects to it.
So here's what I found also interesting in the midst of the last week as this all unfolded was that you guys will probably hear us talk about this later on, but if you believe in the metaphysics and astrology and you follow what's going on energetically and astrologically, then you know that we are in a time where Pluto has entered into Aquarius. And there is pretty much an age of Aquarius that's going to last for the next 20 years of our lives. And there are very significant events that unfold during this time. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was 200 plus years ago. And during that specific time in history, there were a lot of revolutions that happened, as well as a lot of innovation. A lot of things changed for society during that time. So again, if you believe in astrology, then you know that the effect that the Pluto in Aquarius causes is genuinely known to be associated with community and collective consciousness. So Pluto's transit through the sign of Aquarius tends to ignite widespread activism and movements for social justice. Interesting. Also, it's known for uncovering hidden truths and power dynamics. So during this period, existing power structures and inequalities could be exposed and challenged. Another thing Pluto in Aquarius is known for is major societal changes, potentially impacting government structures, technology, and social norms. So there have been a lot who have already, because Pluto went into Aquarius early November. So people have been like, well. The timing of this is very interesting because, again, this concept and theory wasn't a recent thing. This has proven centuries and centuries to be a common known shift in history every time these 200 plus years pass and Pluto goes into Aquarius. The astrological community have been itching because we just entered. So people have actually been on social media and it's been really funny because one person on like Threads was saying how Pluto in Aquarius wasted no time since it entered office because 3 weeks later, look what happened. Like a huge monumental movement, against government, society, structural norms, and look at the response of people. And it's not just the United States. Just in the last couple weeks that Pluto went into Aquarius, which is the same position that brought on the American Revolution, France government falling, protest in the country of Georgia.
Yes.
The resisting of martial law in South Korea.
Yes.
And then billionaires being targeted in the US. I don't believe those things are coincidence. I believe it's very interesting that something energetically has shifted in the world because it's everywhere. And we're already seeing interesting responses happening. So that's a little side take that I found personally very interesting.
Yeah, I think that definitely is. I think that historically, even if you're not into astrology, even if you're not into the metaphysical, I think you can look at historically what has happened in the world and how, in order for massive change, we're talking systems being torn down and new systems being put in place, takes revolution. Unfortunately, historically, it's taken bloodshed, it's taken civil war.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily saying that we're entering into this time. I know
or
a lot of
hoping
people,
for it or anything.
no, I know a lot of people have speculated, have put out there that there is a potential because of the great divide that has come up and because of the unrest. But I think that we're definitely seeing at least the effects and the symptoms of unrest, in that people are, they're done, you know? And we talked about this in our very first episode with Feminine Rage, where a lot of women are saying, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking care of me. And I think a lot of people are starting to shift and realize, oh, it's not my neighbor that's the issue. It's not the other person who's also living in poverty that's the issue. We need to actually focus on who the issue really is and who's benefiting from us being divided, who's benefiting from us paying $10 for eggs, who's benefiting from our health insurance claims being denied, and actually do the work, actually educate ourselves and expose what is pretty much been in plain sight for so long. And I don't really understand why so many people are so unwilling to see that, why they're so willing to blame their neighbor, to blame their coworker, to blame, you know, somebody in their family who is liberal minded for the issues in their own life. But we're now waking up to see that that's not the case. And it has brought, I would say, a lot of people together in a unique way, because a lot of people were like, I don't care if I see this person walking down the street, the suspect. I don't care if he comes to me and tells me in my face that he did it, or hands me this bogus ass manifesto that he supposedly wrote.
Yep.
I am not turning him in. There's even been this clip going around of a movie that Tom Cruise was in. I think it was called Jack Reacher, where he's running from the police. Well, not technically running, he's in a car. He steps out of the car and allows the car to keep going, and then walks into a crowd of people. The police are still chasing this empty car, and somebody in that crowd hands him a hat to cover himself, to disguise himself. And that is the mentality that a lot of people have had. We have all been united in our disdain and our disgust of wealth and the privilege that it affords you at the expense of others.
Yes.
And we are done with catering to that 100%. And I think that this is a testament to that, and that so many people are rooting for this suspect to not be convicted, to walk free. I don't know what's to come.
No clue.
In this situation, I am very interested. We may do a follow-up episode on this, depending on what comes out of this. But I will say, for now, at least, when it comes to the mentality of the average American person who works a 9-to-5 job, who is not living in wealth and prestige and privilege, there is a united mentality about, we're done with the 1%, we're done with the millionaires and billionaires, let's eat the rich kind of thing.
And that's the thing, the phrase right there, is that there are people who are like, oh, change isn't going to happen, this doesn't solve anything. But so many on social media are going, do you not remember history? Because the whole eat the rich concept has been revolutionary many times in history, that resulted in huge societal changes. Yeah. Like Heather said, unfortunately, it does come to the extreme of bloodshed and sometimes civil war. Granted, we don't want to see that, but I'm at the point where I'm going, I won't be surprised that this isn't the end of it. This may have just been the beginning of something bigger to come.
Yeah. I will say that we do want to see change. We do want to see systems dismantled. We've mentioned that before in previous episodes. It is time for things to shift. The average person is struggling so hard, and there's no reason to, especially in the supposed greatest country in the world.
One of the richest countries in the world.
There's no reason for people to be struggling as hard as they are. And again, there is a breaking point. Everybody has their breaking point. And I think that we're starting to see where that line is being etched into the sand of, this is our breaking point. If you go past this, things will happen. And we've already seen that with one person who decided to take a very specific route in administering their form of justice. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see potentially more of that in the future if things don't change. But heavy episode,
we
but
had to
very
talk about this. We had
needed
to.
yes, needed, necessary, because we're all in the same boat here. We all are people who are working, people who are trying to make a living, people who are just trying to exist and live. I am so sick of personally having to constantly fight to have clean water, clean food, healthcare provided when needed. These are basic needs that shouldn't be so difficult to come by. And we're seeing more and more of the struggle with that. The amount of listeria outbreaks that have happened, the amount of food recalls that have happened due to deregulation.
Too many.
It's getting to a point where enough is enough. And I think that that's collectively what people are saying. Enough is enough. So
this country is a country with resources and money that none of this should be a common occurrence.
No, but when we are favoring capitalism, when we are favoring big business, when we are putting profit over people, this is the result. And again, enough is enough. So a call to action for our listeners, head over to Instagram, head over to YouTube. Those are the two main platforms for discussion. We may have some discussion on Threads as well, but we want to hear from you guys. What has been your mentality about all of this? How have you been feeling? Are you pro-suspect or anti-suspect? Are you pro-victim?
Let us know.
Yeah, let us know. What do you think is going to come out of this situation? A lot of people are making predictions. We'd like to hear your predictions. We'll definitely be involved in the comments section, reading comments, having discussions with people. Again, as we always say, this podcast is about community, about hearing from people, about creating a space where people can express themselves and have conversation with like-minded people. So Desiree, take it away as always.
Friends, you know what to do. If you don't, please head over wherever you are listening to this podcast. Make sure you are subscribing or following. And very important, please leave us a review. That helps other listeners to find us. If you're on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like and comment on this video. And all of our social medias are available everywhere. Go take a look, hang out, say hi. We love meeting each and every one of you, and we love connecting with you all. So also, any ideas for future episodes, let us know.
All right, until next time.
See you later, guys.
Bye.